I was going to say the two things are linked. In fact, as I was listening to Glenn earlier, I then saw some serious connections that we also have to make. But I want to comment on Patsy B's comment. A friend, Rishi was saying a friend that went to university couldn't, and who worked in a bank for some amount of time couldn't make change or whatever. And it is something you see. You go to the supermarket, because we're talking literacy and numeracy, and it's almost, I do it here and I do it overseas, because you go somewhere, your bill is let's say $32 and 70 cents. And I would give the person $52.75 of, 3/4 or whatever the case, because it's 70 cents. And they look at me. I've had it happen in Barbados, and I've had it happen in the US on many occasions. The person said, "You've given me too much money." I said, "Yes, I have given you more money than the bill, but I want you to give me back change in a specific way." In other words, if it's 32 something and I give you 52, I want back a $20 bill. And they're confused. And so they're looking at me. I said, "Just put the figure into the machine as I gave it to you, and you will see exactly what happens." We have a problem. And I think, Glenn, you're correct. A lot of parents, well, both my parents were, like you, they didn't go to secondary school. My father turned out to be a pupil teacher for a little while, he said, and we could talk about that another time. But my concern is, even as we start to talk about free movement and everything, what is going to become of our labor force if they cannot compete in a very basic way, if we have large numbers? Because you mentioned the fact that people, I'm sure you had this experience, Glenn. Can you help me with this form? I forgot my glasses at home. And the person probably never wore a pair of glasses in his or her life. But they simply will not be comfortable saying, "I cannot read." And so it is a problem, because we are coming from a place where, and the truth is, if you talk to some of those you used to call it seven standard,
right?
Standard persons, not only could they read and write, their penmanship was excellent. They could write, if they had to write a letter, not only was the letter grammatically correct, but it was very legible because they had good handwriting. They were taught to write in many instances. But we really are having a problem. And my question is, when we see the deterioration in the standards, because at the end of the day, if you might recall, I don't know if you recall me discussing recently what is supposed, or what used to happen, and what I believe is supposed to happen in our primary schools in terms of criterion testing. And so one of the things that these weaknesses, these problems, at least symptoms of a problem, because the fact that a child at 7 or 8 cannot read or write at a certain level is indicative of something. And so the question is, how do you deal with that if there are tests to be done where parents are to be notified about their students and teachers have this information? So I think, Marcia, is a problem, and it becomes more problematic. This is where we'll make the link now with the whole issue of the movement of people within CARICOM, because we are talking about a desired position where CARICOM citizens are able to move freely. And that suggests that people will go and compete with others outside of the jurisdiction in which that individual or those individuals were born. So in essence, if I had to be an employer here in Barbados looking for a particular skill, or forget the skills for a minute, somebody who is low skill, because I'll get back to the technical things in movement, but somebody coming into Barbados looking for a job, and that individual is competing with a Barbadian. If the Bajan does not have the basic literacy and numeracy skills, he or she becomes uncompetitive. You know, why should I choose somebody when if I want a plumbing assistant or a carpenter, an assistant to me as a carpenter or a mason, and that individual, if I said I want you to work out the quantities of materials, or I'm giving you certain direct instructions, it has to measure this, it has to do this, and whatever, so wide, so long, whatever, you know, the width is this, the length is this, and you have a difficulty, then you are putting yourself at a major disadvantage. And the question therefore is, when we talk about these things, are we preparing or maintaining standards that are important in relation to our citizens being able to compete in very basic ways? So I think that when we start to look at one of the things that we will talk about in this whole notion of movement, of course, is you know, as I said, do we have the infrastructure? Now, infrastructure, we think in terms of schools, hospitals, housing, you know, utilities, whatever. But one of the things we also have to think about, what happens in a society where, because we are seeing failing schools, that our youngsters will find themselves not being able to compete at certain levels. Now, so I think that's the connection. So if I could segue into the issue of immigration or migration and movement, because I think at the end of we as part of CARICOM, this is something that has been pursued for a long time. But I want to suggest that while there is of a necessity concerns about the impact of free movement, there are a lot of other issues that relate to the movement of people in Caribbean. And I think a critical part of a discussion has to be, what are the existing arrangements for the movement of people around CARICOM? And I would tell you that from my years working, well, the 11 months, because I was directly responsible for immigration for the 11-month period, and then for the rest of the 10-year period that I served in cabinet, these issues became a part of things that I had to deal with. But I will say this, and I tell off anybody to challenge me on it, that when we talk about free movement and we talk about the movement of skilled nationals, as set out in Article 46 of the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, those two things at this point in time pale in significance to the what I would call the regular movement of nationals from across the region. Because remember, one of the things that has been agreed to is an automatic 6-month stay. So anybody from Barbados going to Jamaica or Guyana or St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines or whatever, they are those persons coming to Barbados, they are entitled to an automatic 6-month stay. And that has nothing to do with the person, well, you know, whether the person has, well, I'm not sure how you establish that that person is able to support himself or herself for the entire 6 months. And so I am suggesting that it is important that as we talk about the movement of persons in the region, that it is necessary that we have statistics, that we have information that we can analyze, not only as government officials, but this information is also going to be very important for private sector planning as well. If you are looking to develop housing, in other words, a person coming to Barbados from anywhere in the Caribbean or vice versa, Barbadians going to anywhere in the Caribbean and is entitled to automatic 6-month stay. If I am moving because the circumstances in my country are not beneficial to me. I have not been able to find a job that pays me well, or I have not been able to find a job at all. If I am somebody who has criminal intent, and that is something we have to factor into this whole movement, if I am such a person, and I come here, there are a number of things that, can I support myself? And if I cannot support myself for 6 months, what happens? Do I start to get involved in what I would call the black market, whether it is working for somebody without the requisite work permit? Because remember, free movement does not apply to everybody. And the movement of skilled nationals is what it says. You have to be certified as skilled. And there are lists of areas or professions and so on, educational qualifications, which qualify you to be considered a skilled national. So I am suggesting that when we start to look at the issue of immigration, and we start to look at the question of movement, and notice I didn't say free, because free movement is a title given to a facility which allows people to move without restriction, without the need for a work permit and all of these things. So I would suggest that the reality is that post-independence and over the time before and after the formation of CARICOM, we have had constant movement of persons, people moving between countries. What we do not know on any given day, certainly the public, we have little information. Let's say we were researchers, because you were talking about, how do we verify that our literacy rate is still 98 or fallen below 98? And if it has fallen, how much is it? So part of the challenge we have in the region, and unless things have changed, and I have a sneaky suspicion they have not, we have not been in the habit of sharing information within the borders and across borders. So in essence, we will hear Barbadian tourism planners tell you that visitor arrivals in Barbados was X 100,000 for the year 2024 or whatever. But if I ask somebody of those visitors, what percentage of those visitors were CARICOM, they may be able to tell you. If I ask what percentage of them were from the various islands and so on, somebody may have it. But these things are not published routinely. And as such, we talk in the dark about movement and so on. And somebody may ask the question, my having made that point, so why do you need information? We need information because we need to understand what impact, because now when we think of tourism, a visitor from any one of these countries who is visiting on holiday, notwithstanding the fact that he or she may have a 6-month stay automatically, may have come here purely on a holiday, 2 weeks. You have your vacation, you go back home, you go back to work. You want to see part of the Caribbean, you have a plan to see all the islands. On the other hand, if you have persons who are moving because their circumstances at home are deemed by that person to be less attractive than they may find in Trinidad or Guyana or Barbados at this point in time, then we have to have, or we ought to have, a sense of, what are the numbers like? What are the profiles, demographic profiles? Are young people traveling? Are people traveling because they may have come here? And, we have this automatic 6 months. They may have come here because they hear that healthcare facilities in Barbados are better or different or more varied than what I can get at home. So I think at the end of the day, it is not simply a situation where people are saying, and certainly from my perspective, when I look at this, we don't want others to come here, or we worry that they will simply come to take your jobs. The issue for me is one that, as we seek to facilitate regional integration, the movement of individuals across the member states of CARICOM has to be done in a way that it ends up benefiting the maximum number of people. In other words, if I travel from Barbados to St. Kitts, I should do so in a way that does not end up being detrimental to myself, because I get there and then I realize I don't have enough money. I never anticipated what the cost of living is, or, well, in the case of Barbados, our currency is, in terms of exchanges, our currency is stronger. But but let's assume that I were traveling with Guyana dollars instead of Barbados dollars. At least we're not traveling Guyana dollars because they don't take, we don't take each other currency generally, but I am operating on the basis of the strength of my dollar and my savings accumulated in a particular currency. That I go to a jurisdiction and I find myself unable to take care of me. What implications does that have for the state and the social services of that country? So I am saying all of this because we tend, when people start to ask questions, when persons like myself ask questions, people are saying, people are fast to talk about xenophobia and all of those things. Part of the challenge that we have is that we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to do so in a way that allows us to assess our capacity to accommodate persons, schools. What we hear that our pupil to teacher ratio may be high.
Yeah.
What are the implications of that? Housing. Barbados is somebody said to me today, and I would have to go back and check, and this is a friend who's regional person but's been living outside the region for several years, and who follows trends. So the guy said to me, Barbados is the 7th most expensive jurisdiction. And I suppose he was looking at the family and nations within the UN. Now, if Barbados is an expensive jurisdiction, and then you are traveling from a member state where your currency, the exchange rate is not in your favor, it's going to take a lot more of your dollars to pay for prices in Barbados dollars.
Correct.
How does that impact on your ability to survive in the event that you've taken an automatic 6 months, but you have no job prospects or very little job prospects, or the job that you can get does not allow you to be able to meet your expenses? So I there are a lot of things. What are the implications, for school? And so I am really concerned that as the officials seek to put in place something that they believe has been long overdue, there's a reason why it has taken time. There's a reason why can't leave McClean said Maxine has placed the cart before it without first having a common currency. No, I was trying to understand it. No, I don't have to have a common currency. But because we do not have a common currency, and we have currencies where their relative worth in relation to one another, there's such disparities, variations. If you look, the Belize dollar is pretty much like ours in terms of value. Trinidad is much higher than Guyana. Jamaica has been fluctuating more downwards than upwards over the years. So I don't know that is a major issue. However, as I said, because of the variations, it is going to make it more expensive for some and better for others, depending on the direction in which you move.
I tend to think that that for this whole thing to work, we need to not just travel to have fun with each other and to enjoy each other's country, etc., but we need to be able to do real business with each other. And I know that this whole issue of being able to pay somebody, you've done work in one island and as a small business person and you want to be paid, it becomes difficult for a lot of people. And so if we're going to be serious about this thing, then I think that we need to look at currency. The other thing I want to say is that when we're talking about this whole thing of free movement, and we are now not going to have any work permits and so on, okay, fine. The question is this for all workers, or are we still only allowing skilled workers to move? What kind of workers are we allowing? Because as someone is saying that they're seeing that they're in Barbados, you have a lot of security guards who are non-nationals. I've seen people, as I said on the show before, quite a number of people selling snow cones from my country, from Jamaica. I said Barbados, and I've seen a Jamaican man pushing a cart selling soup in the hot sun. That is a Jamaican culture that we drink. They walk about and sell soup in Linston Market, but he was walking in Bridgetown selling soup. And the question is that we need to ask and understand from our leaders: have we moved away from requiring that those that are migrating, those that are coming here, that they are throughout the region? Has CARICOM changed that? Is it still skilled workers?
No, but you see, that is why I would say, Marcia, that we have to look and recognize that there are several things in place at the same time. Free movement, which is being undertaken now by 4 member states. I think it's Barbados, Dominica, Belize, and it's St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I think it is. This was announced at the last Heads of Government meeting earlier this month. Now, free movement is what it says it is, right? That you are removing restrictions. And so people can move and look for jobs. They don't have to get a work permit, and whatever the case may be. Now, you have raised an important question. If before it was restricted in terms of skilled nationals, and I was looking for the section in Article 46. I think what they were telling you, it's in the initial stages, and I think they've added to the list with the movement of skilled community nationals. It referred to university graduates, media persons, sports persons, artists and musicians, and they've added some more to that, I believe, recently. Now, clearly, with the movement of skilled, it is not any skilled or every skilled, and it was pretty restricted.
But here somebody said it's a Jamaican man selling coconut in a push cart as well. What is it? We need to understand what is it.
But you see, that Jamaican man has not moved under any skilled. Well, I presume not, because he could have moved and didn't find a job. But it is highly unlikely that that person moved. They would have come here probably under the automatic 6 months. Remember, I mentioned that there's the automatic 6 months, anybody can take it. Now, if I think about it, somebody who's going to be selling water or soup in the way you described it, well, the person is hardworking and whatever the case may be, they are engaging in something that's low skill and informal.